My name is Peggy Adams, President of the League of Women Voters, Flint Area. With partners Communities First Incorporated, represented by Lori Ross, and Flint Beat, represented by Scott Atkinson, we share a purpose to engage, empower, and educate Flint voters. We're happy to bring you a virtual community forum today to help you decide which candidate for Flint City Council in your ward will get your vote. Questions will be asked by representatives from Flint Beat and the League of Women Voters, while Communities First Incorporated staff will ensure the forum remains on time and on schedule. All candidates who have qualified to be on the ballot, as well as write-in candidates registered with the clerk's office by September 24th, were invited. Only write-ins who are registered with the clerk's office can be counted in an election. Because of our time constraints, we could not accommodate write-in candidates who registered after September 24th. Some candidates chose not to participate. All were informed they would need to comply with certain rules, such as refraining from comments on other persons and only taking the opportunity to tell voters about their own qualifications, priorities, and outlook. All candidates are asked the same questions, and all have the same 2 minutes to answer them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this today and for being an engaged citizen.
Welcome, everyone. I am Scott Atkinson with Flint Beat. I am joined today by Peggy Adams from the League of Women Voters, Lori Ross from Communities First, Inc., and our 7th Ward candidates, incumbent Monica Galloway, Lakeisha Turode, and Allie Herkenroder. So we are going to start with you, Councilwoman Galloway. And our first question is, if you could just introduce yourself and give us a summary of your qualifications and skills that make you an asset as a council member.
Thank you. My name is Monica Galloway, and I have been the council person for 8 years. I began with the city council in 2013. At that time, I was a novice, if you will, to the city government. But in that time frame, I have pursued governmental training through the Michigan Municipal League Elected Officials Academy, in which I have completed all 4 levels. I am one of only 14 people that have done that. And so I have strategically done everything that I should do to ensure that I am prepared to continue to lead this community in government as a legislative official.
All right, Ms. Herkenroder, we will move to you next. Could you give us a brief summary of your qualifications and skills that would make you an asset as a council member?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me today and for setting this up. My name is Allie Herkenroder. I am a 2017 graduate of Spring Arbor University. I graduated with honors with a degree in history and political science. Over my course of being in college, I was able to learn a lot with parliamentary procedure at the age of 19, so very well versed in parliamentary procedure and ready to hit the ground running with that on day one. I managed the resident services department within the Flint Housing Commission. So had to do a lot with legislative regulations, understanding the implications of those regulations, creating policies and procedures around those regulations, as well as being able to utilize a significant amount of grant funding. So I've leveraged over $300,000 in grant funding for the city and for our community. So all of that, combined together, coupled with my love for this city and my love for giving back to the community, and the vision that I have for our future, which is heavily reliant on improving our infrastructure, improving access to healthcare, and being able to help utilize community voice, especially as we move forward to fight crime and blight. So I'm very excited to be here today. I'm very excited to serve the city of Flint. So thank you.
All right, Ms. Turode, we will end with you in this first question. Could you give us a brief summary of your qualification skills that would make you an asset as a council member?
Yes, sir. My name is, and first of all, thank you all for having me here. It's been difficult as a write-in candidate to get organizations to acknowledge the write-in candidates. So thank you. My name is Lakeisha Turode. I am running as the write-in candidate here for the city of Flint. I am the only one born and raised here in the city of Flint. My education is through the city of Flint. I have a degree with a study in psychology and minor in social work. I am a mental health advocate. I am on the board of Catholic Charities, where we have leveraged millions of dollars. We deal with millions of dollars on a daily, consistent basis. I've been on the board for 3 years, where we have leveraged funds for the city of Flint, as well as services for the city of Flint. I own and operate 4 mental health facilities here in the city of Flint, where I have personally written grant proposals myself, received grant proposals or received grant funding for my mental health services in the city of Flint. I am a mental health advocate pushing mental health. I do not believe we can address the crime without addressing the mind. So that is part of why I am running. I have been working as a community advocate in the city of Flint since 2010. I work with Riverside Tabernacle, donating food, water, and resources to the community for over 9 years. As a board of Catholic Charities board member, I've been working with them in the Center of Hope on homeless issues in the city of Flint, particularly downtown Flint. We donate hygiene products and resources to the community. I also worked in the school system at Summerfield as a librarian. So I thank you all.
Okay, thank you all. Moving to the next question. And this goes to you, Ms. Herkenroder. Sorry about that. The question is, what are the 3 most pressing issues facing your community or ward? And if elected, how would you address them?
Yeah, so whenever I'm out talking to people, the 3 biggest issues that come up, it doesn't matter what precinct they're in or anything like that, the 3 biggest issues that people raise are crime, blight, and sidewalks. We have the opportunity to be able to help leverage the American Rescue Plan dollars to help build back our infrastructure, particularly where the grants and the funding from the water crisis did not cover the sidewalk replacement or the street repair from when people were able to get their lead lines replaced. So we have the opportunity to fix that. Second of all, with crime and blight, similarly with the American Rescue Plan dollars, we have the opportunity to be able to invest in technological solutions to be able to help fight crime and blight, because we know that there's not going to be enough police officers to cover every single spot where we know there's dumping, every single intersection where we know that there's problems, the drag racing situation. We know that there's not going to be an officer there 100% of the time. So we have to be forward thinking. We have to have long-term solutions, and we need to implement different technology to be able to help prevent things from happening, because prevention is so much better than reaction. So being able to implement cameras, motion sensing cameras around dumping, popular dumping grounds, being able to help cameras so we know who was doing the drag racing. In the state of Michigan, we can't do automatic ticketing. That's from the Attorney General, but being able to help move that forward so that we know where to start. Hey, we got this license plate, so we know where this person is. We know where we can go to hold people accountable, because we are lacking accountability in this city, and we need to keep moving forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, would you tackle the same question? What are the 3 most pressing issues in your ward, and what would you do about them?
Well, the 3 most pressing issues, definitely crime, blight, and the infrastructure problem with the flooding and everything on Court Street. So with crime, I am currently working with officers in the Flint Police Department on crisis intervention training. As I stated, as a mental health advocate, I do not feel like we can address crime without addressing the mind. So we are currently working, as we speak, on crisis intervention training for mental health. Once we tackle that, I think that we can lower the rate of crime in the city of Flint. Also, as far as the blight and everything goes, we are currently working on that. I'm working with the land bank. We are rehabbing homes. I do supportive housing. So we're rehabbing homes that are in the city of Flint to allow people to own and operate those homes in the city of Flint. I think that's one of the biggest issues is we have to push more ownership in the city for residual income. People will then start to have to pay taxes on housing. So I am currently, this is not something that I'm looking forward to working on. This is something that we are currently doing. I also wrote up a proposal for the police department in the city. Do I have 5 more minutes or is that stop? I can't hear her.
30 seconds.
Okay. We wrote up a proposal. Mine is a dual enrollment program. So we are trying to get juniors and seniors to enroll in my, as well as the police academy, to have a waiting list for policemen, because I am a law enforcement family and we are pushing law enforcement in the community to work cohesively in the communities as well as outside the community. So we want our policing to be here.
And that's
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Galloway, would you address this as well? What do you feel are the 3 most important issues, and how would you? I imagine that you're addressing them as we speak, but how would you address them?
So one of the things that everything that has been said are definitely high on the radar. But after serving this community for the last 8 years, aging in place for our seniors. I serve a community that has some of the highest retirees, elderly communication. I have 3 of the largest senior facilities in my ward. And so one of the things that has happened is aging in place has been affordable aging in place. Seniors that own their homes that are unable to have repairs done, affordability, of course, of water. And so I don't want to minimize crime, but I just want to address the aging in place. I have a very good partnership with the those agencies that work with our seniors. Was very proud to support the writing of a grant that was requested by McFarland Home. They requested $7 million and received $8.2 million, of which Congressman Kildee will be having a press conference tomorrow at that location, 800 East Court Street. But one of the things that this community has struggled with is identifying the very residents that have invested the most in our community. And so they are retirees that have not been able to have their due, if you will. We also have to focus on the retiree debt that we have. We owe the retirees of the city of Flint over $500 million. And so when I look at the things that we need to do, we need to really look at how we're financing our community. What are we really spending our money on, and what are the things that need to be cut? So yes, we do need to see what are some of the grants that we can do to help our residents age in place. What can we do to bring affordable water rates to this community? Now that we're saying that the water is safe, what can we do to ensure that they can afford it? And affordable housing. And so I will partner with the communities like I have with the McFarland House. I want to thank Congressman Kildee for his support in helping us to secure that $8.4 million. And that's a start. I know that Catholic Charity is working on tiny homes. And so those are the things that are really focused in my community.
Stop, please. Thank you. Thank you all. Scott?
All right. So Ms. Stewart, we're going to start with you on our next question, which is, what best practices will you employ when making decisions on behalf of the city?
My best practice is listening to the constituents. I'm grateful that Councilman Galloway did mention the McFarland homes. We are currently working with the senior citizens. I'm on the board of Catholic Charities, where we pick them up every week. And we've been doing it for years, picking them up every week to make sure they get hygiene products like toilet paper, soap, tissue, which was very important throughout the COVID. So my best practice is knocking on doors, listening to the constituents and seeing what they need, what the desires are in the community, because someone can say, that their biggest concern is the sidewalk, which has been a definite issue, or street lights for safety. So we are working on what's best for the community through listening to the constituents in the community. We are currently working on these issues. I just did not start this because I'm running for elections. I've been doing this in the community for years. So we are working with the seniors. We are working with mental health. We are working on crime and blight. And we are working to get things accomplished in the city of Flint so the city can progress and move forward. I do understand that the city budget, you can never know. The only one that has the insight to that, unfortunately, is Councilman Galloway, because she's been sitting in the seat. But you can never know and understand the budget until you get in there. But you can hear what the citizens want and need.
Okay, Councilwoman Galloway, we'll move to you next. What best practices will you employ or are you employing currently when making decisions on behalf of the city?
So one of the things that I am starting to do is build a coalition with constituents in my area that are very passionate about certain things. And so what we're doing right now is we're beginning the talks of having community meetings that are based on vision. One of the things that we realize is that you have to have a vision for your community. And so you have to begin to treat even our ward like a little mini city, if you will. But you have to have people that are passionate in certain areas. There are people that are passionate about blight. There are people that are passionate and are focused on the land bank. I have one of my communities, Central Park neighborhoods. They do it very well. They know all of the houses in their community. They know who owns the ones that are blighted. They know whether they're land bank. And so one of the things that I'm doing is partnering more with those invested residents that are willing to make that partnership. I don't really do a lot of Facebook, only because some of the Facebook feeds are a little different from what I'd like to do when you're communicating with the residents. But also I have started asking the residents how would they like to be communicated with. Some like Facebook, some like email, some like phone calls. And so I'm just continuing with partnering with the block clubs and the block club captains. And those are the ways that I have been trying to build that partnership and find out what the needs of the residents are. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Herkenroder, what best practices would you employ when making decisions on behalf of the city?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost comes community voice, right? So before we even take office on day one, I've already been listening to all of our residents. I've gone to every single precinct except for the 50th. That actually is tonight, is my final stop on my listening tour around the 7th ward, because we have to make sure that we're representing the people who elect us, right? It doesn't matter what I think. If the community thinks that we should go one way, then that's the way that we should go. So we need to implement and uplift the community voice first and foremost. Another best practice is making sure to not engage in any kind of petty personal politics in any way, shape, or form. For too long, our city council has been very dysfunctional and has put their ego above the people who they serve, which has led to a lot of dysfunction at city council meetings and for our community. We don't have things getting done within our city because we're too concerned about who said what and everything like that. And that's not what it should be. We are here to serve the community. We are here to do so professionally, and we are here to listen to the concerns of the community. So building off of that, if I'm elected, one of the things that I'm really excited to do is host either monthly or quarterly town halls to make sure that communication is a two-way street and that I'm accessible for residents, making sure that there's a lot of different ways for people to get in contact with me and for me to contact them. So very excited to bring that new vision and that new perspective to city council because we need a change.
Okay, moving to the next question. What efforts would you take as an elected leader to ensure transparency and access and governance?
I think we're starting with Councilwoman Galloway. I think you're up next on this one.
I guess I should have actually addressed it to you. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Can you repeat your question? I didn't know who you were speaking with. Sorry.
Absolutely. The question is, what efforts would you take as an elected leader to ensure transparency and access and governance?
So the transparency is really contingent upon the Open Meetings Act. There are already things that are in place. And so the responsibility of government is to ensure that we are living up to those things. Transparency means that our budgets are online, accessible to any resident that wants access to it. Being available, I have been available for the last 8 years, around the clock. Residents know that they can contact me. I have residents that know that they will get their calls answered. And so the transparency comes in making sure that things that are being done are done in an open setting. No behind the scene deals that are being made. And so that's how you ensure that transparency is met, and you're consistent in that. And so again, I would say just making sure that the Open Meetings Act is honored, that the transparency is done in an open setting, and that residents know that if they have an issue with any transparency, that they can contact us at any time, 423-7332, and that their answers and their concerns will be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Herkenroder, would you address that question as well? What steps would you take in terms of transparency and access and governance?
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the things that is incredibly closed off to the community in particular are the appointments to the Ethics and Accountability Board. That is an appointment by the city council members. There's no process with that. So it can be, your friend who lives down the street, you could appoint them to the Ethics and Accountability Board with very little qualification. So making sure that that is an open process within the ombudsperson's office, making sure that the community has access to know who those applicants are, instead of just, you don't know what kind of backdoor deal someone is having with somebody. Be like, oh, if you help me do this, I'll appoint you to the EAB or something like that. That's unacceptable. We don't need anything like that in our city. We need very clear hiring process. We need very clear contract process. We know that there was a major problem with the garbage contract as far as the way in which that process was followed. And one way that we can help do that is making sure that there are formal policies and procedures in place and accessible to the public. Currently, there is nothing like that accessible to the public. Similarly, the Code of Ordinances from the city hasn't even been updated or codified since 2016. We need to make sure that there is very, very clear access electronically, in person at City Hall, what have you, and have multiple forms of that access there, and being innovative in that access. Like, we know that 40% of our residents do not have a broadband subscription in their home. That's across the city. So that means that we need to have another accessible alternative for those residents. Similarly, the second most spoken language in Genesee County is American Sign Language. There's not an ASL interpreter at a single council meeting. That is leaving out an entire population of our constituents who need to be represented. And I know that my time's coming to an end, so I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Theroux, what would you do in terms of transparency and access and governance?
Well, you ask these questions and I appreciate them, and the other candidates bring up great points because they are bringing up things that I am already working on. I deal with the deaf community currently as we speak because I have deaf clients, and we have been trying desperately to get that communication to be bridged. So we have been in contact with different agencies to definitely bridge the communication gap. So that would be one of the issues that I will continue to work on. We talked about the qualifications of folks that are on the ethics board. Well, we need to bridge the gap between people who have been working in the community, working for years in the community, such as myself, instead of people who come in the community to run for office without doing adequate, detailed community work to get to know the constituents, to get to know the community. So I think that's one thing that should absolutely be addressed with the city of Flint. I've been partnering with community leaders in the community in each ward. We're not just talking about 7th Ward, but we're talking about the city of Flint, because any official that runs for the city or for a ward should be concerned about the entire city. So I've been partnering with leaders in different wards in the community to bridge the gap. So thank you.
Thank you. I do want to say something to all candidates right now. In some of your remarks, I'm speaking to you all, you have gone dangerously close to the line of debate. And although you have not attacked people personally, you're definitely being sharply critical of practices, and there is no way for anyone to really respond to that. So I want you to remember, though nobody stepped over the line, you're just getting a little close. Remember, this is about what you would do. Remember that. That's the one thing. So I don't want anybody to step over the line and get silenced. So moving forward. Thank you. Scott?
Thank you. So Ms. Herkenroder, starting with you in this question, how are you going to keep our communities safe and clean?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, isn't it? First and foremost, we have to partner with community. We can't be in all places at all times. We can't, be at Cook Park and Pierce Park, and, we can't be at all the places at all the time. So that's why we need to make sure that we are building those relationships with our park adopters, with our neighborhood associations, and making sure that we all come together. Right now, they're very segmented. It's very palpable how segmented it is, and being able to help create a space where everybody can come together and work forward together, because it doesn't matter if one neighborhood is doing something tremendous for the community, because we need to expand that impact across the entire ward, across the entire city. You could be doing amazing things in one portion of the neighborhood, and that's great. But we have to make sure that we're here to impact the entire city. So creating those spaces for people to come together, and being able to listen to the concerns from everyone too, and modeling that behavior as well. So whether that be through regular cleanups, whether that be moving the traffic barrels that keep getting blown over on Dort Highway every single day, or anything like that. We need to model the behavior that we want to see within our community, first and foremost. So definitely modeling that behavior and partnering together with all of the block clubs and bringing them all together, and the park adopters as well.
All right, Ms. Terode, same question. How would you keep our community safe and clean?
Well, we're going to be realistic. No city is absent of crime, but we are trying, and the whole goal is to get crime on the decrease, which, like I said, I'm currently working on and been working on for years. But that is involved with building community networks, which is what I'm doing, building community communication. For example, there were some young folks in our community speeding. There were some complaints. So what I did, I went to their homes. And on Center Road, where there is a home on Chandler Street with a landlord, because I am also a landlord, instead of degrading all the businesses, I wanted to build relationships and rapport with these businesses and these speeders that we personally know are speeding through the neighborhood. I want to build relationships. So that's what I've been doing. I went to their homes, I went to their businesses, and we met. Personally spoke with these people to see if they would agree that they are a part of the city of Flint, not just part of the 7th Ward, but you're a part of the city of Flint. So help us help the city. And 2 of the residents that were speeding throughout the neighborhood in Chargers decided that they didn't know that they were such a nuisance, young folks. So they decided to work with our community. So we've been in constant contact. So communication is definitely one thing we need to implement in the city. Thank you.
I believe. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, Councilwoman Galloway, you're up next. Safe and clean. How would you do it?
Safe and clean. So one of the things that as a legislator, it's important that we place proper alignment on expectations and roles and responsibilities. So one of the ways that I do my best to keep the community safe and clean is, one, to ensure that there is the allocation of resources necessary for the police department and or blight. With that, in addition to that, there has to be accountability. Safety in a community is the responsibility of the executive branch. This is exactly why the mayor gets to appoint the chief of police. He aligns with someone that he believes is prepared to keep the community safe. If in fact that is not happening, the legislative branch is responsible for going to the chief, as we do every year, saying, Chief, what do you need? Do you need more money? What do you need? And if the money is not the problem, then going to the administration and say, what is the plan? What are we doing? We just cannot declare a state of emergency. We know that gun violence is an issue, but what are we doing? If our police officers are not paid, are we negotiating with the unions to see, can we increase that? How will that affect the community? And that is a function of the mayor. So the way that we keep the city safe and clean is allocating money, and then two, making sure accountability is there. Blight is the new area that is under the office of the mayor. That actual allocation for that line item is now under the mayor. So if we are not seeing our communities clean, then we have to hold the proper branch of government accountable for that.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're now moving to the last question. And I believe that would be to Ms. Herkenroder. And the question is, how would you approach balancing the city's budget?
I love these questions. They're so good. Well, first and foremost, we have to look at the recommendations from the auditors. In 2018, there were recommendations from the auditors of exactly where to put money and how much to put that money there. We know that there's a $24 million deficit within the pension, the retirement budget for our community. We need to make sure, exactly like what Ms. Galloway said, we need to make sure that our retirees are taken care of. And that means properly allocating that money and doing so in a very legal way. If it's done illegally, we're just going to have this continuous cycle of emergency manager, of funds not getting, appropriated in the right way, shape, or form. And we need to make sure that we're doing that within the letter of the law. So we need to also get creative with that too, right? We know that we have this $93 million or $94 million from the federal government. We can't just put that wherever we want. We can't just zero out water bills. We can't just do things that we want to do with all this money. I mean, for crying out loud, I would love to do so much with that money, right? But we have to do it within the letter of the law. And that means going back and looking at the regulations and making sure, okay, this pot of money can be used for this. We can't use this pot of money for that pot of money. So where can we get the funding for this pot of money? What creative ways can we think about being able to bolster the city's budget? One of the ways that we need to do that is through economic innovation. It's a long-term solution to a short-term problem, to our problem that right now we're experiencing in the short term. We have to think of long-term financial solutions that are not Band-Aids, because our city has gone through so many Band-Aids. We're getting Band-Aids for our elbows when we need Band-Aids for our heads. We need to appropriate money equitably, and we need to do it legally.
Thank you. Ms. Turow, same question. How would you approach balancing the city's budget?
I definitely, as I've stated throughout this broadcast, my number one priority is listening to the constituents. I don't have my own agenda as to where the appropriation of the funds should go. I definitely been listening to the constituents. They are troubled by the blight. They are troubled definitely by the crime. I have partnered with law enforcement. So I definitely want to make sure the retirees are taken care of first and foremost. But I also want to make sure money is in the budget for hiring, training, and getting police officers on the street with broadband infrastructure, making sure that we have the technology to police our streets. So I want to make sure that everything is transparent and that I'm listening to the constituents as far as where the money should be spent. Once again, I want to just make it clear that I don't have my own agenda as to where the money should be spent. I want to be transparent once I'm in office to hear from the constituents, to find out the absolute needs, to coincide that with the legalities of where you can utilize the money and spend the funds. And then we'll decide. We will decide together as a team, as a whole, as a city, where the funds should be spent. But the number one issue I am dealing with currently is blight, crime, and the infrastructure issue. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway. How would you approach balancing the budget?
So your question is, how would you approach balancing the budget? That's important because the budget is not balanced. And so I would like to say that in the 8 years that I've been on city council, under our leadership, we had a $24 million fund balance. And although it's been said that that's not really real, it is in line with the Budgeting Act. The Budgeting Act requires that each municipality have a fund balance. A fund balance is like your savings account. What do you do in an emergency situation? Well, before the current administration came in, we were struggling with some debt, but we had $24 million to help with that. It wasn't until this last budget that we found that we were $17 million in the deficit. Yes, we do owe our retirees, but the reality is this: the budget process in which we've seen done in the last 2 years in no way affects budgeting, balancing our budget. And why is that? We need to be looking at every line item. We haven't done that. We need to be seeing, where is money being spent? How much are we spending on professional services? What are those professional services? Those things need to be identified by line item. The way that we balance budgets is we spend the time necessary. Does that mean you're going to have long meetings? It does. But the number one responsibility of a legislator is the budget. We are responsible for making sure that this city is financially solvent. And right now we are not. And so what you do what the charter says in the 7th section of the charter. And we need to follow those guidelines and find out where money is being spent unnecessarily and whether or not we are meeting the responsibilities of this community. That's how you balance a budget.
Thank you. And thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, and that concludes all our questions today, everybody. So yes, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Have a great day.